President Donald Trump visits California to witness the devastation from the LA wildfires, and he announces two bold conditions in exchange for federal fire aid. Coming up, I'll tell you what those two conditions are, why I support them, and why we actually need three more on top of those two for a total of five to really solve the problem. I'm Carl DeMaio, chairman of Reform California and a California state representative representing District 75 in the California State Assembly. President Trump visited California today to witness the devastation from the fires and to call out the negligence and incompetence of California politicians who contributed to the severity of the disasters. I am so grateful that President Trump is literally the only leverage we have to try to restore sanity in California. He's coming out here to pledge support, but the best way he can support us is the way he's doing what he's doing. Offering money, yes, which is part of our federal disaster preparedness or response program, is that we provide funding to communities to help them rebuild, as right we should. But if we don't change policy in California, you and I both know these disasters are going to continue to happen and they're only going to get worse. So President Trump demanding conditions, absolutely long overdue. So thank you, Mr. President, for demanding conditions in exchange for federal aid. Now, I'll tell you, the president has two conditions that he wants to apply. But I actually think that the two that he has are good, but we actually need three others to really deal with fires. But you're going to hear from the liberal media that the conditions that the president has imposed are pejorative, they're petty, they're vindictive, they're unprecedented, they're indefensible, that you shouldn't be conditioning aid in any way, shape, or form. Absolutely, you should condition aid because otherwise these disasters will continue to happen. The best thing Trump can do for us is to demand that California liberal politicians clean up their act, clean up the mess that they've created. So here is the announcement of the two conditions. President Trump speaking to reporters.
Funding to Los Angeles because of its sanctuary city policy?
I want to see two things in Los Angeles: voter ID so that the people have a chance to vote, and I want to see the water be released and come down into Los Angeles and throughout the state. Those are the two things. After that, I will be the greatest president that California has ever seen. I want the water to come down and come down to Los Angeles and also go out to all the farmland that's barren and dry. You know, they have land that they say is the equivalent of the land in Iowa, which is about as good as there is anywhere on earth. The problem is it's artificial because they artificially stop the water from going onto the land. So I want two things. I want voter ID for the people of California, and they all want it. Right now, you don't have voter ID. People want to have voter identification. You want to have proof of citizenship. Ideally, you have one-day voting, but I just want voter ID as a start, and I want the water to be released, and they're going to get a lot of help from the U.S.
All right, so those are the conditions, voter ID and give water back to our communities. I tweeted moments after he made the announcement of two conditions for federal fire aid, disaster preparedness aid, response aid, voter ID and give water back to our communities. It's a great start, but not complete. And again, these two things, if we just got these two things, it would be good. It would be progress. But I also want to fix the failed approach to fires that California has. I want to fireproof California. And in order to do that, there are three additional conditions that need to be applied. Number one, prevent. We need to change policies in California so we can prevent fires. In other words, allow communities to reduce the risk for fires by clearing brush. And force government, state and local government, to clean up their lands. It is overgrown, a complete tinderbox. They need to do their damn job and thin their forest and clean out those canyons and open spaces. They need to do controlled burns, risk mitigation, prevent. So the whole condition of prevention policy changes. Second, respond. The water issue is a big part of Respond, making sure we have water in those reservoirs to backfill those fire hydrants, to have adequate water for firefighting. But also we need to make sure that we're looking at firefighter staffing, preparedness plans, exit routes. The response element has to be reformed. And then third, rebuild. These homeowners that lost their homes, they're not going to be able to afford to rebuild because A, they're not going to get insurance, but B, they are not going to be able to afford all the insane regulations, the costly reviews and regulations. And no, Gavin Newsom has not waived those requirements. They are still as stringent as ever. He's a liar. He's just, trying to grandstand and pretend like he's doing something like red tape cutting. It's not, his executive order has done nothing at all. But the bigger issue is the building code of the state of California. The state building code is insane. It's why building a house in California costs 3 times what it costs in Texas. So I gave a speech yesterday on the assembly floor telling the Democrats that their wildland fire disaster recovery bill that they passed it's offensive. It's window dressing. It's crumbs compared to what we really need to do, which is reform policies so these sorts of disasters don't continue to happen time and time again. I'm going to share that with you so you can hear me go through this 3-point plan of prevent, respond, and rebuild. This would fireproof California. And I want to get this plan to be the conditions that the Congress applies on top of the 2 that President Trump announced today. But in order to do this, we need your help. So I'm going to play the clip in just a minute, but please join the fight to condition this aid and to reform California's crazy approach to fire management. Go to reformcalifornia.org. Reformcalifornia.org. Do 2 things. Chip in a contribution because we need your help. Put gas in our tank to fuel our fight for sanity and reform in our state. Second, please sign up so you can stay part of our movement. You can get updates on our voter guides, candidate recruitment, things happening in your area like rallies. Go to the bottom of that website at reformcalifornia.org. Sign up your first name, your last name, your zip code, your email, and your phone number, and then you will be tied into our movement. We build our movement. We build a grassroots army. We will take back our state. So here are my comments from yesterday, laying out 3 additional conditions on top of voter ID and water that we need to apply to federal aid and change policies in California so that we can actually fireproof our state. Watch.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Obviously, I will support this initial funding, but my concern is that too little, too late, not enough. Crumbs for the victims, negligence for communities that are still in harm's way, that might experience the same exact disaster, not might, will, if we don't act. Fire victims deserve more. Our communities demand more. In my district, in the last 48 hours, we've had 4 fires break out, and thankfully, our first responders put them down. My district has had devastating fires, and I know many of your districts also have had devastation. How many more fires do we have to undergo and experience before we actually solve some of the policy failures that have led to the higher risk? We can actually fireproof California. I know you're trying to do a lot of proofing of California, but the most important thing that I think Californians want from every political party, they want to fireproof California because that is a real danger to our communities. If we're going to fireproof California, we are obliged to address 3 failures of state law and policies right now. Number 1, prevention. We will not be able to prevent and reduce risk until we clear brush. But our environmental regulations, laws imposed by this body, regulations imposed by agencies that are supposed to be answerable to this body, prevent communities, property owners, from actually clearing defensible space. It's a nightmare. More importantly, we have been negligent as landowners. The state lands, local lands, we have been negligent in clearing our own lands of the brush. That requires funding. It also requires oversight and accountability. Nothing in this bill accomplishes that. Second, prevention has to be coupled with response. We have to fully staff our fire response agencies. And right now, our firefighters are basically social workers in a lot of communities because of the homelessness epidemic that we are creating in this state. The 911 calls, diverting those precious resources, and let's also be clear, they have to respond to a lot of fires that are set by migrant camps, by homeless camps. Let's deal with those issues. Third, rebuilding. As a council member in 2008, I had to take responsibility for rebuilding over 2,600 homes lost in the Witch Fire in my district. That was in 2008, and it was a nightmare. Government regulations, the state building code made it so expensive, so time-consuming for those fire victims to get their lives back in order. Do you know what this state has done to its state building code since 2008? It took something that was already insane and made it much, much worse. The governor last Sunday, I believe, made a big deal about red tape be gone. I haven't seen something so dishonest from that office in a long time, and by golly, there's a lot of competition coming out of that office for dishonesty. Not a single word in his executive order gave relief to fire victims. Not a single word. And so if we want to provide red tape cutting, we have to pass the laws here to cut the red tape. I am concerned that this body is going to use these two bills as the window dressing on this issue. I am very concerned that this body will walk away from this vote and actually not get the job done. If we can't get the job done while everyone is watching us in the middle of a crisis, what is there to expect? Can these communities, can fire victims expect us to do the job in 3 weeks, 3 months? I fear that we won't. We'll go on to something else. The public will move on to something else. But those that have lost their homes, they'll be stuck with the damage, with the nightmare. And more communities will join them soon. So while I support these two bills,
30 seconds.
it's not enough. Finally, let me just point out, the federal government, of the $2.5 billion, about 90% of it, I believe, is expected to be reimbursed by the federal government. We're going to the federal government, so but none of us should get credit for this money, by the way. The state lawmakers don't get credit. This is federal money coming for reimbursement. Let's be clear about who's giving the money. But they're talking about conditions, and thank goodness they are, because I don't think this state will clean up its act on fire management
Thank you,
until we're required to. So be careful about what we're spending today. Without the reform, you may not get the revenue.
Thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this episode. But before you click away, please subscribe to this channel and click that notification button so you get updated when we post new episodes. Plus, like this video and share it with your friends so that we can help spread our message across the state. Reform California with Carl DeMaio is paid for by Carl DeMaio for State Assembly.